Pokémon Legends Z-A. It's been about 9 months since its release in October of 2025, and almost 2.5 years since its original announcement back in 2024 on Pokémon Day. There's much to be said about this game, but the question is, was it good? Was it bad? Somewhere in the middle? And ultimately, after all this time, what are my final thoughts on the game? When it comes to Pokemon games, I do tend to be more lenient towards them. I love Pokemon, and just being able to play a game that's set in the world that they've created, and being able to pal around with the Pokemon characters that I like, I often find myself enjoying the games even if they're flawed. And that's no more evident than how I perceive Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But unlike Scarlet and Violet, Legends Z-A is not broken. Sure, on the Switch 1, it is a little framey, but it generally runs very well on the Switch 2, and there's no glaring glitches. So right out of the gate, Game Freak had a game on their hands that had no real baggage at launch. Yeah, there's design ideas, concepts that maybe people weren't super crazy about, but the game didn't offer anything broken. It didn't do anything overly controversial. Even something as simple as being set in one location, any criticism that people had overall did die down a little, even if those criticisms may have still been valid. Ultimately, what did I think of the game? Well, overall, I did really like it a lot. I really liked the core story at the very least, and I thought it was a lot of fun to play. I'm going to cover some of this stuff kind of in a pro list and con list, but overall, the real-time action, the characters that they chose to implement, the story that they chose to tell, I thought it was something real special. Enough so that I would love to see another game very similar to this, maybe with a broader scope in mind, though. Before I do get to my pros and cons list, I do want to get to the fact that they did skip over anything Gen 5. Now, I'm not going to relitigate my thoughts. I don't know if I've ever made a video on it, but I've said on social media that I did not like how leakers were acting in the run-up to the announcement of Legends Z-A. Many people, including myself, were under the assumption that we would get something regarding Gen 5. Whether that be a Black and White 3 or a Legends QREM or whatever, people thought we were getting something Pokemon Black and White. And when they announced Legends Z-A, it was a shock. So much so that for the remainder of 2024, which they never talked about Legends Z-A again until the next Pokemon Day, people were so crazy about everything that they actually thought that we would still get a Pokemon Black and White remake. Which, in hindsight, I think for everybody else, was insane. For me, I knew right out of the gate what was happening. That being said, I do think it was sort of smart of Game Freak to leapfrog over Gen 5. Gen 9 was, in a word, problematic. And while Legends Z-A is actually fairly well put together, it is a much smaller scope game. And I'm wondering if Game Freak wanted to do something with Gen 5 that was a little bit more expansive, thus kicking it into either Gen 10 or even beyond. Now, that's not to say that Legends Z-A doesn't have its charm or grandeur, but it is all set in one city, and I'll get to it later on, but there's a lot of similar looking buildings. So ultimately, as a Gen 5 fan, I'm kind of happy with that. We've seen what they can do now when they have longer periods of development time, and if a future Gen 5 remake or Legends game looks anything like Winds and Waves, I think we'll be in for a treat. But that's not what this video's about. Let's talk about Pokemon Legends Z-A. I think what I'm going to do here is maybe do a compliment sandwich. I'll start off with some pros, and then I'll put all my cons in, and then we'll end on a high note and talk about stuff that I like again. Let's start off with a huge pro, and that is shiny sparkles are back, as well as the sound effect. I cannot believe that they didn't have this in Scarlet and Violet. It is so important, and I hope to God that they keep it in Winds and Waves and future games moving forward. The idea that you can not only see that a Pokemon in the overworld is shiny, which is an obvious given, but also it makes a noise and it sparkles a little bit, showing you that there is something special about this Pokemon. It's so important. I can't tell you how many times I've been roving the city of Lumiose and suddenly finding a shiny Pokemon and having no idea where it is, but I know it's around. That gives me the opportunity that I might otherwise not have to catch it. Not to mention, shinies in Legends Z-A do not despawn, at least not all the time. There are specific mechanics in Legends Z-A that keep at least 10 Pokemon that have spawned as shiny present. And the next time there's a Pokemon that spawns that could be shiny, it just replaces the first one that was shiny on the list. So you're never in a position when a Pokemon turns up shiny and it just disappears. Next up, let's talk about battles, because this is probably the biggest departure from other games in the past. The real-time battling is honestly so much fun. It is so good, and I hope that they refine it. I know that there's some talk of Winds and Waves maybe not having it, and maybe that's just how it is for, like, you know, the next generation, but I hope that they do not leave it behind. I want to see something more like this. I think what you could do in future games is have 2 modes, one traditional, one action-oriented. I think that this is the future of Pokemon, and I hope that they don't abandon it. Being able to throw out any Pokemon that you want on your team at any point, which they kind of did in Legends Arceus anyways, just being able to do that in real time and having them attack Pokemon from behind and sneaking up on trainers, it felt great. A lot of people had complaints about Scarlet and Violet not having a huge focus on battling, given that you could not battle any NPCs if you want, other than the ones that are story related. And this game kind of changes that by making everybody a threat, and I think that's a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are fans of turn-based combat, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that there's got to be a way to kind of bridge the gap, maybe having different modes, one for action versus one for turn-based traditional combat. And not for nothing, I don't think turn-based is going anywhere anytime soon, given that Champions is turn-based, and, you know, they're not going to completely abandon turn-based gameplay, given that that's how VGC works in the first place. The next thing I want to talk about is, well, just simply, hey, more DLC. I'm going to use this opportunity to transition into my cons. I think DLC on its own is perfectly fine. I love the idea of having a new adventure with the same characters from the game that I just played. I want to see more of them. It not only gives you a reason to play more of the game that you already own, but it just makes it more memorable sometimes. Now, that being said, I am going to transition into my cons list for a little while now. I did not like the Legends Z-A DLC. I mean, the broad story is good. I don't mind Ancha, and being able to do more things with the cast of Legends Z-A was a lot of fun. Not to mention, and I'll get to this later on, but being able to see the aftermath of the main game's story was fun too. But you can genuinely see where they cut corners as far as not development necessarily, but just time and money. Apparently, they spent a ton of money on Scarlet and Violet's DLC, which you can see because they had 2 whole new areas with each having their own stories, and there was a lot going on. With this, you can tell that they didn't get the same amount of budget. The DLC's story was thin, and not only that, but it was grindy, meaning you had to do a lot of meaningless tasks over and over again just to make the story go forward. Not to mention, the areas that they added for the DLC are not only temporary spaces, but they're not fun to traverse at all. Outside of the first time you go there, they're not interesting to look at or explore. They're just kind of boring, and like I said, it's grindy. It's just not fun to be there. On top of that, like I said, they make them temporary. They come and go, which would be fine if you could just come and go as you please. But then on top of that, you're spending all these like berries to make the donuts that then have a time limit. If I'm going to a new space, I want to be able to spend as much time as I want there, especially if I have to put something in to get there. It ultimately resulted in going to these mega spaces or mega ultra spaces or whatever, and it felt like, oh, I didn't come out with anything worthwhile. Sure, I may have caught a new Pokemon that was not in the game originally, but I, already had that Pokemon from other games, so it's not as interesting. While I love the core game of Legends Z-A, I just honestly did not like the DLC, and that's a shame because I can see where the vision is coming from. And not for nothing, they had some really cool boss fights in it. So it would have been nice to see something more from the DLC. Speaking of uninteresting, I will admit Lumiose is a little bland looking. I think that there are some fun points of interest, and I don't have any problem with playing a game that's all set in one location. That being said, many of the streets and corridors and alleyways do kind of end up looking very similar, and I think they could have done a little bit more set dressing. If you're going to set the game all in one place, at least make each area look unique from the other areas. Instead, they kind of gave us a lot of similar looking buildings with the color of their roofs just being different. And finally, in the cons list, again, no voice acting. This is something that has persisted for a long time. It wasn't so bad on the 3DS, but as soon as they made the jump to the Switch, it became very obvious that while Game Freak has a vision for more grander looking scenes, they don't have voice acting, and that kind of drags the whole thing down. It results in scenes that would otherwise be very cool and engaging kind of just feeling a little awkward. And while I don't think that there will be anything nearly as bad as Piers' concert in Sword and Shield, I wish that they had something. They already have a little bit of oofs and ahs when you're moving around. Although, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure Z-A has as much of that going on as even Legends Arceus had. They just have to put something in. Come on. Alright, that's enough negativity. Let's move back to my pros list because I've got a fair few more pros to get through. First of all, Mega Evolutions are back. That's a lot of fun. Listen, I'm not crazy about Mega Evolutions in the way that other people are, but they are certainly way more flashy and way more entertaining looking than something like Z moves, for instance. I'm never gonna not want to Mega Evolve my Pokemon, so having them back is just a lot of fun. Not only that, but we got some brand new Megas, many of which are very cool. I especially love that they gave Meganium a Mega Evolution, finally making it a fairly good Pokemon. It's even better when it has its ability in Pokemon Champions, so I'm all for it. If they want to continue making more Mega Evolutions, I'm not going to say no. I'm just holding out for a Mega Evolution for my favorite Pokemon, Typhlosion. Now let's talk about the general gameplay, and I'm not going to kind of go granular with this. I just think Legends Z-A plays fun. It's not as smooth as it could be, but I thought that they did a pretty good job of making traversing a city feel fun. You've got real-time battling, you've got Pokemon attacking you in the zones, and not for nothing, I think them introducing Pokemon through the zones was actually a pretty good idea. It allowed them to filter in Pokemon throughout the story in a meaningful way, and kind of give you a new flavor of the city every time they added a zone. And once you get the Rotom Glide, you really kind of start flying everywhere. That being said, I wouldn't have minded a faster mode of transportation, maybe a bike or something like that. But between the parkouring and the fast traveling, you can get around the city pretty quickly. Meanwhile, they brought back side quests. That's something from Legend Arceus that I really wish that they had done in Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet felt very empty, and I feel like if they had side quests, they could have filled it up way more. Legends Z-A also has side quests, and while I think I filled out all of the side quests for the core story, I don't think I've done all of them for the DLC. There's always something to do, many of which are fetch quests, but some are interesting, like helping a Pokemon make it to a cafe, or helping a movie producer film horror movies. It also just brings the city to life in a way that if you didn't have these interactions, then the city itself would feel a lot less interesting. Now let's talk about the characters and story. I don't want to get too in the weeds of the story in case anybody is looking forward to playing the game still and they just haven't yet, but it is one of the better told stories in Pokemon. Is it simpler? Sure, but it's a very character-driven story, and I think that makes it a lot of fun to experience. Starting off as a tourist that's just there to visit the city, and then being brought into this chaotic adventure, it's a lot of fun, and it's emblematic of what I want to see more from the Legends games. Sure, it's fun to travel a region and collect gym badges and be the hero, but sometimes it's interesting to see what the rest of the world of Pokemon is like. There are other adventures happening that are not happening with the core main protagonists, quote unquote, and I think that makes the Pokemon world feel more filled out and more interesting. I love Team MZ. I liked Tawny as your kind of friend, leader, rival. I loved what they did towards the end with her, where you kind of have this thing where you're the main protagonist here, but she kind of wants to be, and I like that she has to come to grips with that, almost realizing that she's the second fiddle in your story. Lita and Naveen also have their equally interesting stories, things that are happening to them that don't necessarily involve you, but you get to know them more, almost like they're real people, honestly. Meanwhile, I'm kind of bearing the lead, but you're at a hotel owned by AZ, this 3,000-year-old man. I loved what they did with him, and especially in the ending, I gasped when I found out what happened to everybody. One thing that I think Game Freak does very well and is continuing to do better when they have the opportunity is to tell a story that actually makes you feel something. It's still a Pokemon game, but it's fun to see these characters, and not for nothing, it's interesting to see AZ come back and kind of atone for his crimes from X and Y and beyond. It's a resolution that I never thought that we would get, but I'm very happy that we did. The final pro that I have goes back into battling, and that is in regard to the online gameplay. Now, typically, I'm not much of a competitive player. I dabbled a bit in the first couple seasons of Pokemon Champions, and I've played a little bit here and there in the main games, but I'm not really much of a VGC player. But when they announced that there was going to be some form of ranked battling in ZA, I was intrigued. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. One, it's super easy to rank up. There's no real consequences when you lose, which I realize is not super challenging, but hey, it's something fun. Not only that, but because the battling is so engaging and interesting, it's actually just a lot of fun to hop in, do a couple of ranked battles, and then go about your day. And while I'm not a huge fan of how they implemented the Mega Evolutions that they gave you through the ranked battling, I do think that they ultimately made them very accessible for when they were available. Battling in ZA is honestly so much fun that even when you're playing online and you lose, technically, you're still having a good time, and I think that's worth them exploring in future games. So that's my list of pros and cons about Legends ZA. Overall, I enjoyed this game quite a bit. While I'm not crazy about the DLC, and you can definitely see where there's rough edges, I do think that they made a very good game with a cast of characters that are a lot of fun to be around, and I honestly hope that we see more of this kind of game. Legends ZA is not exactly the same as Legends Arceus, and it's very different from the other main series games, and whether it's the storytelling or the gameplay, I'd love to see them do more of this stuff. Heck, even if it's just in another Legends game, I just want them to continue pushing the boundaries of Pokemon. If they can do interesting stuff in Legends games and use what they learned from that, and bring that into the generation titles, I think that that's something that can ultimately elevate the series as a whole. On the whole, I really enjoyed Legends ZA. If you're at all interested, I think it's worth playing, and that's all I really gotta say about it. Alright, that's it from me. What did you guys think of Pokemon Legends ZA? Let me know down in the comments section. What's your favorite Mega Evolution? Let me know. That's all from me. I will see you guys in another video hopefully soon. Take care.